Hello everyone, Anders, Mind the Shift. I've mentioned before several times, I think, that I think it's a little bit strange. It doesn't make sense to me that so many people from the spiritual community are so very, very worried about the state of the world, especially the environment. To me, that doesn't really make sense because spiritual people are, for the most part, it's the general idea of being spiritual, that you have a more optimistic, positive view on you as a human being, your soul, and what you actually are. You're a spark of the universe, and you can do anything. You can create anything, and I'm with that. But I also have, as you may know, a more positive and optimistic view on the state of the world as it is and what humankind can achieve and has achieved. And I also follow the trends and the averages, and I crunch numbers. And I don't see that disaster scenario that's so much spoken of out there in the mainstream media, in the headlines, and by politicians and organizations and everything. And the ironic thing, I think, is that most of the people that have that worldview, the same worldview as I have, the more optimistic one, are not particularly spiritual. But I am spiritual, and so I combine those things. And I think it's odd that it's not that common to see it that way in the spiritual community. Or maybe I've just missed those people. I know there are some that look at things more or less in the same way. I think Greg Braden has spoken about, for instance, climate change in a way that is not really this apocalyptic scenario, but rather the other way around. So anyway, I wanted to do this when I listened to the dear Dr. Bruce Lipton, whom I mentioned in my latest video, and I love him. He says so many good things. He's so good to listen to and so optimistic, basically. But I listened to a brief video that he did the other day, and where he talked about how we can convert hell on earth to heaven on earth. But the thing is that he started by describing the situation right now on Earth as hell. We have devolution. He talked about disaster scenarios. He talked about the environment, of course, but I mean, in more general terms, that the prospect of extinction is real, and that it looks really terrible out there. And then he said that we have created this hell on earth because we have for hundreds of years we have believed in false assumptions about what reality is, false assumptions about science, which I have no problem with. I'm with him there. I think so too. But it's as if these problems are to be taken at face value, okay? Then he goes on to talk about this wonderful concept of the honeymoon effect, which I also mentioned in my latest video. The honeymoon effect, meaning that if you lead a life, you as an individual lead a life that you find dull and dreary and perhaps even miserable, you feel miserable, and then you meet somebody that you fall in love with, and within 24 hours, it's like heaven on earth. Everything is perfect because everything you ever wanted is right in front of you. You don't want anything else. It's right there. So then you can stop thinking about things and you see the beauty of the nature, you see the beauty of the sky and the trees and the animals and everything, and you see no harm in any other person on earth. It's just perfect. It's heaven on earth. So then Bruce goes on to say that, so heaven was there all along. Look, we can create heaven on earth. But what he implies is, or not implies, he says that we can change the state of the world because we are creative beings. I mean, he is the father of epigenetics, so he talks a lot about us being able to, just by virtue of our consciousness, by our thoughts and our feelings, change the very DNA, the very cells in our bodies, to activate or deactivate genes that have a potential to cause diseases, for instance. We can decide that. I mean, we can steer that by our consciousness alone. And I mean, the honeymoon effect, it shows clearly that it's a mindset. What you focus on is the reality that you will have. But the inconsistency is that when it comes to looking at the world at large, the world as a whole, humanity, then the problems are supposedly to be taken at face value. But why? I mean, you could just as well say to an individual who feels miserable that we should take their problems at face value as well. I mean, all the things that they see as terrible, all the details that have gone, the things that have gone wrong, and how they feel, and that they never seem to succeed in any way. We could just as well do that. So I think there's no difference. We're all one. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you talk about these things focusing on an individual or a group of people, or if you're focusing on humanity as a whole. And you can talk about the honeymoon effect to humanity as a whole. Why not? The whole humankind, the whole human species should experience, I think, the honeymoon effect, which would then make us see the world as it is, which is a lot brighter, a lot less terrible than we read about in the mainstream media and the headlines. Don't read those. they're just misery snippets of reality. So I think there is some kind of inconsistency here, if you see what I mean. I hope I make sense. Hopefully this helped some of you, or not, or if it didn't, it might have made you think, hopefully. So anyway, this is what I wanted to convey to you on this Friday. Now, you have a wonderful weekend. Love you. See you next time. Bye-bye.